My background was I grew up on land in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, and my wife Melita, her family's been running, she's like 6th generation cattle farmer from the South Burnett area in Queensland. And back in 2015, actually, we were on her folks' property, and we were actually experiencing theft as well, but in cattle, not in sheep. And when we were there, I mean, as frustrating as it was, what we found was there was a lot of other improvements that we could make as well. Like, we wanted to use the land a lot better. We wanted to do holistic sort of understanding of how the animals move across. We need to improve our traceability. Biosecurity was absolutely paramount to us, and improving that as well. And what I'm going to show you is some of the other benefits that comes about. So why did we start it? How did we start it? Well, I was basically an engineer without a job. So we had this idea, and we decided to give it our best shot. And one of the first things that came to our mind was, if we're going to do this traceability properly, right across the whole supply chain, is we need to do it via satellite. You couldn't have communication systems that didn't work in remote areas. So where are most of the livestock in the world? They're in remote areas. So we needed that connectivity to do so. Thank you.
I don't pay me for this, so
that's right.
That's been a miracle.
Yeah,
it's coming.
Beautiful.
Oh, you got it? Yeah.
So clicker, you got the clicker?
Oh, it's just it's yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Hopefully that will work too. Well, that even works. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the company and the technology, not specifically about livestock theft, because you're going to hear a lot of that today anyway. So it's just a little bit about how it works and why we did it and where we are today. So there are more than one product. There is a tag that is a redeployable tag that can go on animals. So if your animal dies, you can take it off one animal and put it on another. And that's the CERES range. We started off with CERES Trace to improve traceability. So once the ear-tag went on, and I can show you some samples of those, just happen to have them in my pocket. So this was our original one. It was a twin pin, and that was, once you put that in, it doesn't come out. But you know, the ranchers or the producer said, hey, I want to reuse it. So we produced this one with a top that comes out, and you can replace these tops and put it back in and put it on your next animal. So very innovative to be able to get multiple uses. Around about 6 months after we launched, which was in May 2021, middle of COVID, about 6 months later, we received some photos of the tags in a giraffe's ear. And we went, wow, we've just transcended into wildlife as well. And since then it's grown, it's on antelope, it's on camels, it's on rhinos, it's on elephants, it's on just about everything you could think of from a megafauna perspective, both invasive species and those wonderful African animals. And soon, later this year, we'll also be releasing a pet product, which uses a different platform as well, because people want to know about their cats and their dogs and the love that they give them. So why did we actually develop the technology? Not only for the traceability, but we actually wanted to improve improve the risk mitigation and reduce the risk that people experience on their properties, not just theft, but also animals go missing for other things like wild dog attacks, which I'll talk a little bit about more. But as we move into this new world of sustainability, we need to understand about the animal and the animal welfare. So one of the things about our tag is that it is a smart tag. So not only does it have the satellite, but it also has an accelerometer on it as well. And that accelerometer is able to determine whether the animal's in a healthy condition or not. So there's various different algorithms that we can add, and I'm going to go through one a little bit later called pasture feed intake. So we can even measure the amount of kilograms dry matter that an animal is consuming, as well as even the methane emissions predictions of that animal as well. And why is that important? Because market access into the future is going to be absolutely critical. You're going to need this information. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it is coming like a steam train. It's called Scope 3 supply chain. So why is that important? Because Woolworths, Coles, all the big retailers are going to need this information for their own shareholders and their consumers that want to know this information. In South America, they got trouble with deforestry. You might have heard of a little place called the Amazon, and the EU has just released a law that says you cannot supply your products into the EU unless you can prove that you're not taking them out of deforested areas, no matter whether it's the Amazon or in Australia or Africa or whatever the case may be. So all of these regulations are fast coming through, and we're all going to need this data to be able to prove that. The other thing that we want to do is make it easy for farmers. So put the tag on, let the data come through, and there's some wonderful software companies here today. I encourage you to actually have a talk to them about how they then show that information for you. There's lots of other things, but we're going to move on. So how does it work? The tag goes on the animal. You have to activate it before it goes on the animal. It goes on the animal's ear. On the inside of the ear is our preference, but it can go on the outside of the ear. Doesn't matter whether it's left or right. Tag then automates the data and sends the data via the satellite. Now these particular white ones, they send them up to 4 times a day. However, it has machine learning for if there's an emergency, it'll send an emergency signal. So if you're getting particular issues, the algorithm on board says, hey, this is not normal, and does an immediate emergency signal. It does not wait until the regular send, but it will give you regular updates as well. I've been hitting buttons here, sorry. So we do have another one called CERES Wild, which the researchers and conservationists like to use as well, but that one sends up 24 times a day. It is a lot more expensive. The data then comes down to our data back-end platform of CERES Tag, and we push it out then to the software people. And I really encourage you to talk to the software people here today about what they do, because they're all different. And your circumstances will suit one of these software, which one will be up to you to decide. So as you can see, sheep are a bit of a new world for us, I'll be the first to say, and there's someone here from Indikium Dynamics who were the first to put on sheep, but this was primarily built around the cattle industry, and now we're extending that into other species as well. So improved animal health, welfare, animal insights, alerts when they're outside of your boundary. Has anyone ever had an animal that jumped the fence? Yeah? I know we have. Yeah. Improved mustering efficiency. On these big properties, they go, where the hell are my animals? Where do I go? I mean, when you get bringing in helicopters and manpower, womanpower more these days, it's, you know, to save that efficiency and know where to go directly to start your mustering is a huge advantage. Save you literally days. Improved pasture utilisation, understanding where the animals are and what part of the paddock they're using. I know Kevin has divided his property up into so many different paddocks to make sure that they just didn't eat only the sweet stuff. And as a result, his whole property became very, very fertile and very productive. Reporting behaviour traits. Well, we'll talk about, I'll go into pasture feed intake as one, but activity monitoring as one. Valuable carbon farming. Now there's Phil Tickle from CERES Labs is up the back. He's got the brown vest on. I encourage you to have a look at what he does and what it means for your carbon farming and potentially carbon credits, understanding that in the future as well. Asset register. Has anyone gone to the accountant at the end of the year and said, well, how many sheep do you have? Or how many livestock you got? Oh, well, I think it's around about X number. And they go, well, can you prove it? How many losses you had? And it's really guesswork. But with this, you're actually going to provide exact numbers and the accountants will love you. The mitigating of theft we'll talk about later and all day. And the increased accessibility to financing and insurance. more and more, and yet I see we've got Acme here today, encourage you to have a little chat to those guys about mitigating risks, because maybe you can't get insurance in particular areas, but now, because of the transparency of the information, you will get access to those opportunities. Similarly with finance. The banks are all coming on board with this as well. This is the way in which they can see and they feel comfortable giving out more loans and being able to service those loans with accuracy and having more transparent discussions with those organisations. This is one that's really close to my heart. There's a little thing called FMD that's endemic in Indonesia. Endemic. In other words, it's going to stay there. It's just off our shores. In top Queensland, where we come from, it's not far to Indonesia. And it's not just foot and mouth like that's ABC footage, by the way, ABC. That's ABC. That's Indonesia, and that's pretty much what they look like when the foot and mouth, and we detect that because there's no movement. Right, so we detect when there's very high activity and no activity. So we would send alert if they're in remote locations and they're in this condition. The one that really scares everyone is lumpy skin disease. Now, I don't think it affects sheep as much, but lumpy skin disease is transmitted through flies and mosquitoes. So we only need a storm to come across from Indonesia and away it comes. Now, at the moment, there's no way to detect this as if it's happening in remote areas because we've got no monitoring out there. This is where technology like this absolutely changes the game. And we've had instances in cattle where it's detected pink eye in the first cow, and they've been able to move that, and these were high value Angus, and they moved the rest of the herd out, treated that single animal, and the rest of the animals were fine.
How does it detect the likes of lumpy skin?
Well, lumpy skin, when they're in significant pain, they'll lie down, they'll basically die. And if that's happening in a place where there's nobody around, how do you know? Because the mosquitoes then just pick up, transport again, and before you know it, it becomes endemic here too. Now, I don't know if you're aware what happens with FMD. You guys probably know this better than me, right? So sorry if I'm going to say things that you guys don't already know. But FMD, the first one, they draw a 10-kilometre radius and everything's eradicated. Lumpy skin disease, it's 50 kilometres. So, it's pretty serious. And there's a software that will be coming a little bit later today. He's able to simulate and give you the ability to see if one would be infected and which one. Professionals can say, I can cope with 2-kilometre radius or 1-kilometre radius or whatever the case may be, that animals that have come into near contact, so that when that occurs, only those animals have to be destroyed. At the moment, they just draw a circle and that's it. And everything happens when it may not need to. So we've got the potential to save millions of animals as a consequence of using data to make the decisions. On this particular one, one's in Queensland, one's in Montana in the US, where animals got out. They only tagged, and people say, how many tags should I put out there? Literally, you don't have to tag everything. You just don't need to. Try it on a percentage of animals to start with, unless you need the information of every single individual animal, which I think we will get to, but right now, if you tag a percentage of the animals, in this case they tagged about 5%, they got 3 pings outside of the area, they went and had a look, and they had about 50 high value Angus again, outside the boundaries. What had happened, a storm come down, a tree knocked down the fence, away they went. They got the alert, they went, they got them, brought them back in, they repaired the fence. They said, we would have lost $150,000 worth of Angus, but that's not the real pain. And I heard Kevin say this earlier, what they would have lost is 10 years of genetics that they've been building up over many, many years. And that's what really hurts. So natural disasters, we have a few of those. And I don't know about you guys down here in Queensland, we have a lot. Whether it be flood, drought, wild animals, etc. I assume it would be the same down here. But these sort of disasters will also be detected, or if not, you'll at least be able to find it because the animals get displaced. So where are they? And a NILS tag is good, but it says this is what its number is, and it takes a long time to sort that out. What happens in between? So understanding what animals are still alive and where are they brings a lot more confidence about our livestock industry. You can see, animals that get attacked at the back end, and sorry, these are cows, but that's where we started. So, but there's some people here that can tell you a lot more about the sheep. Now I want to talk to you about our first major algorithm that's just gone on, called pasture feed intake. We've got the exclusive license from CSIRO. It's taken 15 years to develop this ability to understand the movement of the animal and the jaw movements, the walking, eating, drinking, resting, and ruminating. So they're all the parameters that have gone into this pasture feed intake, and monitoring those animals and what they're doing and measuring these inputs. And what we're able to do now is actually measure the amount of dry matter intake per animal per day. So all of a sudden you can choose which animals are your most efficient. So measuring your feed efficiency, if you've got a weighing system as well, so you know what your intake of each animal is, how much weight it's putting on, why that's important in the cattle industry, and again, apologies for my lack of knowledge in the sheep industry, we can choose which ones have the greatest conversion of the phenotypes or the genetic selection of the animals in which you should be breeding with to get your most efficiency of your property in the land. But not only that, but if they're putting on weight quicker, that's less time around, that means less emissions that are out there. In fact, we can even do methane emissions predictions. So that's going to be critical to your market access in the future.
Can I just ask, are we going into this in greater detail later on in the day, or can you explain a little bit how an E-tag captures that sort of information?
Sure. So it all uses the machine learning and the accelerometer that's on board. So it's measuring every single little bit of movement, and over 15 years, CSIRO have been able to determine from head down, head up, walking, eating, the mouth, chewing cud, etc. to determine.
So it's actually being able to track the animal's head up here compared to down on the ground, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And chewing, like movement?
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Do we as producers need to know what the energy of the pasture or the feed is that is available to them?
So that's something you should talk to this man over here about those sort of things. There will be a little bit of variation, but it's not a lot of variation. We're talking about a 5, maybe 10% variation, even with the grasses, the animals, etc. like that. But the most important thing that you can do is make sure you have a baseline. So when you have a baseline, any of the improvements that you make, you can then make claims. So that's the most important thing that you can possibly do, and then continue to measure. And when you make improvements to your operation, if you don't do anything different, there won't be anything different. Like, it'll be what it is. But if you're making efforts for your sustainability operations, then that's where you want to make your claims. Not just for methane emissions and stuff, but also for market access purposes. Like, you'll become a more attractive producer of your product if you have the data to make the claims. Particularly in Europe.
Like a steam train.
It's coming like a steam train, yeah. Oh, when we started this business out, we knew that we'd need data. I'm an engineer by profession, and data is absolutely critical, and that's what we've built the whole basis of what we do. I can't say that I'm brilliant or any of that. I've got a brilliant team, and we've got even more brilliant partners that all take this data and be able to make something of it for people like yourselves. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's mostly automated. And once you trust the system, let the system do the work for you. You don't have to do the work for it. So this is where we're active. We're active in 33 countries in about 18 months. So, and that varies for different reasons in different locations. As you can see, a very high cluster around Australia. There's a bit of a cluster down here been on a bit of dairy and stuff as well. And, you know, like I said, that's our very first photo we got back from Africa. Could you imagine when that popped into our inbox about the transcending from just livestock into the conservation side of things? It was pretty special for us. This is just a little bit about our companion animal product, which will be released in the second half of this year. We've got some people to take that into the US and into Brazil, and we're still looking for some partners here in Australia as well. But for those who have got, like their dogs and like their cats or whatever, this is certainly an area of significant growth at the moment. I think since COVID, the growth in pet ownership has grown over 300%. So that's pretty much it.
Do you have anything to do with the virtual fencing technology that they're trying to develop?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you a very short story. The short story is I started out in virtual fencing wanting to do it. In fact, we hold patent for virtual fencing in an ear tag and via satellite. We don't do it ourselves though. And the reason being is in Australia, it's illegal to do it. Yeah. So those laws are coming across very fast, and animal welfare rights and stuff, they'll always be stronger, which is why we pivoted away. But other countries, absolutely, it's very active. New Zealand, US, yeah.
Probably just worth noting, I suppose, the difference there is that this is a GPS tracking system with all the virtual fencing systems. It basically requires some sort of activation to push that animal into a particular location. So audible cues, so they use basically sounds, and the animals get trained to those sounds. And then there's also basically a sort of little tickling device with a small charge that basically gives the animal a little bit of a tickle along as well. But that small zap basically comes after audible sounds where the animal's been trained. So it's a very different technology ultimately than this.
David, I was wondering if you might explain how the tag actually works, the accelerator system, the 21 days to get the data up,
Sure.
That sort of thing, and the PIN notifications in practical way. Just Brent Baker, are you here? Brent, I saw you walk in. Brent actually stole 7 of my sheep last night, but unfortunately one of them had a CERES tag on it, and it was to our delight we could find out where they are. He's hidden them somewhere a couple of kilometres away. So we've sort of had a mock pseudo theft, and that was a great way for us to understand how we could work in real life. So that's what excited me, this accelerator, because I couldn't work out how I would know if my sheep, like they were last year, and Brent had the same, chased by wild dogs, and we lost some in fences and in creeks and that sort of thing, drowned, how we get the message at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
Yep.
And then there's the bit about getting outside the geo fence and the satellite taking. So we'd like to sort of know the nitty gritty of how it works practically for us.
No worries. So does everyone have one of these? Yeah? So similar to these have got an accelerometer in them as well. So for those who are the healthy minded ones, you can look up your whole health stats on these things. It's exactly the same in this one. In fact, we use a satellite group called Global Star, and we've been using those guys for around about 5 years now. Apple have just switched to Global Star as well. So very much using the same systems as, we like to say Apple's using the same systems as us, not the other one, but I don't think people are too impressed about that. So it's exactly the same thing. With the new iPhone 14, if you're in an accident or something and it's an impact, it sends an emergency signal. Similar to this, if you get high activity alerts or no activity alerts, then the tag is able to do an instant send directly to the satellite to inform you straight away. So it's these sort of capabilities that if someone's stealing your sheep, for instance, and there's a very high activity as a consequence, or a wild dog or similar, then it'll start to send or try to send you an alert to say that something is wrong. It won't say, oh, someone's stealing your sheep, and it won't say, oh, there's a dog that's attacking your animals. It'll just say, something is happening. Like, we don't take away the thinking side of things. As a producer yourselves, you still have to think about this. So that's pretty much how this works. It's the solar panel on the front will keep it charged for the 3 years. You get 3 years of satellite in every tag. After that, the tag will need to be replaced. And the reason for that is not because of the hardware, but it's because of the back-end software that each of these tags support. So the difference is that with iPhone, for instance, you'll get 12 months. We're offering 3 years, so it's not a bad deal. Again, if they get a dead animal or something happens to the animal, you can simply replace it, or you're only keeping your animal for a short period of time, you can simply cut the tags, the green part off, get a new one, click it in, and put it back on. So you're going to get your money's worth as well.
I'm sure you've done your research as to what percentage of a flock or mob
Yep.
needs to be tagged in order that you're getting reliable data back.
Yep.
Do you have a number on that as a percentage of mob size or flock size?
Depends what you mean by reliable data.
Well,
So-
I've
To
heard
make a
it,
system like this
yeah,
work.
I've heard it said, and I fully accept this, whether you've got a flock of 1,000 sheep or 450, if you weigh 50 of them, it's a fixed number, you'll get a really fairly reliable, accurate
That's true.
result.
That's
So
true.
it's
Yes.
what percentage do you think need to be ear-tagged
Yeah.
in order to get fairly reliable data back?
Well, no, in actual fact, nobody's done that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't want to lead astray people and make things up. So, I would suggest do it on 1%, then 5%, 10%. Depends whether you, in your particular situation, whether you need every animal tagged, whether you need a small percentage tagged. It depends on what you want to use the system for. And really, what we do is create the data and we pass it on to the software people. So it's the software people you should ask those questions, because they'll be able to tell you what the insights that they are able to make from the data. So, yeah, please do talk to the software people.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
Because I have heard electronic ear tags, the opportunity of, if you do have every animal tagged within a flock, that tags can actually talk to one another. So for instance, if you're putting a tag on a progeny, you can then gain data as to which lamb belongs to which ewe. Have you
Pairing
got
up.
that? Are you looking into that, or have you got
Yeah.
that?
There's actually a study using our technology happening in Queensland at the moment called MB2.
Yep.
And that is exactly happening. So this has Bluetooth on it.
Yep.
So not only does it have the satellite, the accelerometer, but it also has Bluetooth on it. It has a little LED down here as well, will flash when there's a problem. So, and it's quite a bright one, as you'll find if you buy these and activate them. It can carry an RFID. We don't, well, in other countries we carry an RFID so that this can be used in so many different ways. But in Australia I can't, because it's illegal to do so under NLIS, because you can't carry two RFIDs. But it's a real shame, because a lot of people say, oh, can I just scan the RFID? No, actually you can't. So that's just a...
That's talking to politicians, is it?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, and there's a lot of politics behind it,
of course.
which I'm not.
Also,
It's a real shame, because this was originally designed to take over all of the traceability in this country, and for biosecurity purposes, for progeny, for market access, for everything.
Is there a vision that that might happen?
We don't make the rules, and so that's something that need to be taken up with the bodies.
Isn't there a case that you could have an RFID on that and get that accredited through NLIS?
So we're actually accredited to the International Committee for Animal Recording. So it's a body that sits above the NLIS, but we can't get it through the NLIS
Why is that?
because you can't,
If you didn't have your other NLIS tag and that covered off on your numbers,
Yeah.
your PIC number and your
Does all
RFID
of
chip,
it,
why
yeah.
couldn't it happen?
it does all of it. I gotta be careful not to get myself into trouble. Alright, so I'm going to be probably as diplomatic as I can. The requirements to get approval here in Australia for that are onerous, to say the least, and they're designed to be onerous for reasons. And so we can't get it here, but you know, one of our distributors is the Swiss government, so this will be right throughout the whole Swiss livestock industry, 1.2 million animals, because we're qualified to ICAR, and they accept ICAR as their methodology for traceability. But in some countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, there's a quite an onerous process of I got to put close to 2,000 of these out on some animals, leave them out there for 3 years, pray that nothing happens, because if something happens, you have to start again. And it's just it's for a company of our size, it won't work. For a company like Merck or Flex, it's not a problem. Yeah. So, yeah,
So
that's where we are.
if the EU brought it in
Yep.
as compulsory,
Yes.
then that'd put pressure on the government.
So in Latin America, they don't have a system at the moment. They don't have an NLA's equivalent. EU has made a requirement. Yes, we do satisfy all the EU requirements. And because they don't have a system that they have to break before they make a new one, is I've got to be very careful. I'm diplomatic. I do not want, and I don't propose that anything should change, by the way. I can't.
Is one of the issues retention rates, getting caught in fences and
No,
talking about wheels?
that's nothing to do with it.
No.
Because it uses the same system as what the current ones do. In fact, if you look at the Meat and Livestock Australia system, it says that there's a report that says that there's a loss of around about 11% of the tags. Yet the rules say that there should only be no more than 3%, but that's read whatever you want into that.
Can you develop your own numbering system?
We've got our own numbering system.
Put on that so you can pair up.
Yep. Absolutely. But pairing up, absolutely. In fact, even because of the accelerometer, when it's giving birth, get a notification. It's just an algorithm that needs to be added. So you know when there's issues that may be occurring, and then you can do the pairing up if both of them have got the tags in.
How's it know it's giving birth?
Well, I'm going to talk about in cows very briefly, and I've got to be careful not to go out of my remit. But they move outside of the herd for a period of time, and then they actually walk more than what they normally would. So your activity goes up to free up.
And
get
is that
ready for
all
the
in
herd.
an algorithm in the tag?
Well, you can see it on these software guys. But that's actually at software and not at our end. This guy's nodding his head. Make sure you talk to him.
Just thinking, so if you take down my phone number, you've got your mobile phones there, 0418.
It's on the flyer too.
Yeah, it's on the flyer. So I'll just up it again. 0418 530 471. Now, if you could message me, just say hello, that'd be good. Not right now. I'll imagine you're the pseudo police. Now, Brent stole my sheep last night. He's got them somewhere. You're the coppers. I'm going to send the link to you so you can find my sheep within 10 metres of where this tells you. I think it's pretty good technology, isn't it? The key is that how do we get the coppers, phone numbers so we can do that. That one I haven't sort of got around yet. What Brent and I and our farm cluster are thinking of is that the notifications that I get will go to my iPhone, into my email, into our WhatsApp group. That's how we're going to work the clusters through WhatsApp. So if I'm over in, let's say I'm having a holiday like I did last weekend at Langland with the grandchildren and kids, and there's it pings on my phone that there's a sheep outside the geo-fence, or it's running faster than 5 kilometres an hour, whatever it's set, the 21-day algorithm. Not only will I get it, but all the people in my cluster, Brent Baker, Brian Kelly, and all the others, they'll get it as well. And they'll be able to find the stock within around about 10 metres. I think that's pretty good. So anyway, if you give me a ping in about 7 minutes time when we break religiously at 10:30 to have some sausages and a cup of coffee or whatever, for 15 minutes while we do some tagging there. I'll just flick to you that, what's it called, the link, and you can find where Brent has got my sheep hidden. Now, any questions? We've only got David for another 5 or 6 minutes, so please, it's like the other day, I was talking to a very important policeman, lovely fellow, and he said to me after the discussion, he said, "What's really interesting?" And I said, "Well, that's sort of a metaphor that you've got concerns and objections, and you haven't got the guts to ask me. So please don't go home and talk to your steering wheel on the way. Ask the questions now." Yes.
Yeah. So are you gonna explain later about methane production, indirect methane gas production estimation using the tag?
You'd have to talk to me afterwards about that. But
Okay.
the methane, it's a prediction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all based on quite a number of inputs that go into it.
So
And-
what are the inputs you are considering? Because it's a
Oh.
gas and it's an ear tag.
Drinking, eating, moving, resting, and ruminating are the 5 primary inputs to it. There are other considerations that go into that. Again, it was developed over 15 years by CSIRO. If you want to go into the science of it, I'd need to put you in touch with CSIRO. I'm not that smart. I just built a platform to put all these things on.
I'm from Melbourne Uni, so we are planning to do some field experiments. So we have got complete setup to estimate indirect methane gas.
Yep.
So, but we want to compare. This is fairly easy to install and
Very
cost
easy to
effective.
install.
So
Yeah.
I just want to compare the values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's quite a number, again, I would encourage it even more so to talk to the software people that are here today, because that's how you're going to see the data.
Yeah.
And the software people are the people that you really should be working with, because you can just buy these and put these on. How you see the data is through our partners. Now, 4 tags are our distributor that's here today, so they're up in the corner, so you can talk to them about purchasing tags right here today.
Probably just close in terms of, this is new technology, so let's not sort of assume that everything's worked out. The pasture feed intake and things like the emissions around that, the science, there's been lots of publications, as David mentions, from the CSIRO crew and others. It's effectively a reference herd, so it's effectively a reference herd of largely black cattle, largely Angus from memory, and then the models have actually been developed from that reference herd in terms of pasture feed intake, and then assumptions around pasture quality, which then turn into methane emissions predictions. So the work that's going to have to be done is basically for you to be able to then take that reference herd and then look at your herd relevant to that reference herd, and the class of animal and the quality of feed that's being consumed. So there's a bit, but I suppose in the first instance, it's a number based, a prediction based on a reference herd, and then for your herd, it'll be a relative number that you need to then basically develop or work with people to develop an estimate based on the difference between the reference herd and your herd or your flock.
Any other questions?
Have they been used on poles or bandicoots?
The smallest one we've had on is koalas. So, actually, someone did make an inquiry from koalas, but I'm not sure where they went. I don't know, we've got them all over the place, so they could be.
How do they bear with the weight of the urine?
Oh, these are only 30 grams or less than 30. This one's 28 grams.
So that was a bit of a
Tiny.
Change it to a coal or something.
Yeah, they do. On the koalas, they attach it to a collar and put it on the back.
There was a chap down
Yeah,
there.
David, I've got different blocks of property. I use cattle out on different blocks.
Yes.
How can that be worked out?
So you can consolidate that in one view. Again, the software guys are the ones to talk about. The data will be sent through to, that are nominated to you. I'll be sent to your allocation, and the software people will be displaying that. So again, talk to all the software people here.
I just couldn't believe this, but with the cluster concept, so I got the idea from Queensland when we were doing blaze up there at Julia Creek, and I found out about the farmers who were, if they had sort of their properties conjoining, they had mutual boundaries, then they, with the government, would put a dog fence right around, so they go back to sheep farming again. So that's sort of the idea of the cluster came up. But with the STALACC cluster, if you're in my cluster, for example, you can be in, you'd be next door like Brent and joining me, or you could be Tony Butler there over at Newbridge or Loddon, or you could be in Western Australia as well. Or you could be in France, right? And it's simply drawing the map, and I did this with Phil Tickle. Couldn't believe it. Ron was driving me down to babysit the grandkids, and here I am with Zoom, and he said, righto, give us your address. Well, that wasn't hard, 70 Nennies Creek. He said, yep, I've got a picture of it now. Okay, where's your farm? Right? And we actually mapped out 7 kilometres, and we did it in about 3 minutes, wasn't it, Phil? And I was just stunned, so very achievable. This wouldn't happen without the volunteers. We've got several here. Would you like to raise your hand, please? Many of them are on traffic this morning, and thank you for getting everyone in safely. I'm so glad you're with us now, because that's your reward to come and listen to this good stuff. But also in the background, working away, were people like Debbie Butler. Now, Debbie, are you around at all? I did see you. No, I think she might be outside with the sausages. I've missed out on someone, I'm sure. Sarah Butler, our daughter, and Melissa's here as well. But I really thank you for helping, because with this crusade of mine, it's like Blaze, it was passion to help farmers, because I could see there were so many promises by politicians and the like. But I found that the strength wasn't in our politicians, the strength is in our communities. And when we bind communities together, with the glue of being kind and thoughtful of others and treating others like we would like to be treated if we were burnt out, then things happen. And Blaze goes in with a 2% penetration into these, sometimes remote places. And when we finished after several weeks or several months, we put in several $millions worth of work and fencing and wire. And we've got up to 98% penetration, which is just, mind-boggling. And then all the authorities come to us for the information, actually to feed into those, people who've been smashed so terribly by a natural disaster that they can't get out of bed. But we changed that because of the kindness of other volunteers and others, 40,000 of them. So with this cluster concept, I don't make a razoo out of it. In fact, as you know, volunteering costs you money. For me, I remember once I went up to Dunedoo, and I knew I shouldn't have left because I had used lambing. I had this stud white Suffolk ewe, and she was about to land up, a bit more than 3-score condition. And when I got home, it was too late. The head was out, but not the shoulders, and I just had to cut her throat, and that was $2,000 lost. So please, if you think we're making money out of it, I'm not. I just want everyone else to make sure their stock is secure, and we lead into the next phase, which is the lowering of our emissions and getting paid or recognised well for it. I think we might stop there. It is 10:31. We're only going to have 15 minutes for a cup of coffee or get a sandwich. You got to buy that yourself. I think there's a coffee van out there. The toilets are down there. David will be around, but David and I are actually going to go down and whack a tag on one of those fine wool merinos.
He's going to put the tag on.
Yeah, he's going to. Anyway, I did those two Alpha and Beta I did the other day and did all right. And that's the great thing. Look, you'll find me pushing every stakeholder here. 4 tags, which Brad's been absolutely brilliant to me. David Smith, the software companies.
Can we ask the software people to stand up?
Yeah,
please?
yeah.
Please.
Make yourself
These are
known.
the people you need to grab in the break
Right.
and talk about this.
Now, but they are actually going to speak, so you'll hear more from them. Anyway, I better stop talking. So we're going to tag one. So why don't you grab a coffee, come down, and we'll tag one of those merino weenies. They're only about 4 or 5 months old. And thank you. And would you please give a round of applause to David Smith?